US President Donald Trump has his own ways of making America great again. Be it imposing strict immigration agenda to prioritize American citizens or implementing a policy to keep quote-unquote women's sports free from men. Trump is taking brutal route to revamp the American policies and get rid of the old regime. In the latest development, Trump signed an executive order to ban transgender athletes from women's sports. The Republican has lived up to his election campaign promise. And after signing the executive order, the US president said, and I quote, "The war on women's sports is over," end quote. But Trump isn't done with this just yet. He wants it to be implemented across all the international sporting events, including the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. But will the International Olympic Committee comply? Our next report tells you more.
The first 100 days for a president in the United States of America are the most important period. And the 47th president, Donald Trump, is making sure to make the most of it. Though with the amount of changes Donald Trump is making in his initial presidency regime, the first 100 days list could turn into a booklet. Donald Trump has signed another executive order, a policy to ban transgender athletes from competing in women's sport. The Keeping Men Out of Women's Sports order will require federally funded entities to adhere to the Trump administration's interpretation of sex, which is just two genders according to the new regime.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
And just like with every Trump policy, the Republican treated this one as a war too, a war that ended after signing the order.
With this executive order, the war on women's sports is over. Under the Trump administration, we will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls. From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
The order will make it mandatory for the Department of Education to penalize schools that permit transgender athletes to compete. And the schools found in non-compliance could face the risk of losing federal funding. Basically, Trump is saying it's either my way or the highway. The order was part of Donald Trump's broad election campaign, which focused on keeping women's sports free from men, something Trump had promised to implement as soon as he assumed power. But instead, it coincided with the National Girls and Women in Sports Day, which is why when the order was passed, Trump supporters and athletes were all in praises for the US president's decision. Trump has repeatedly targeted the transgender issue in the country. Ever since Trump took oath on the 20th of January, he has passed multiple orders to bring about his idea of America. Trump signed an order to rid the military of transgender troops and also issued an order to restrict gender transition procedures for people under the age of 19. So, when Trump banned transgender athletes from women's sports, it was met with heavy criticism from the community.
For a lot of trans youth out there, it just means, once again, their country's declaring war on them. And this is going to affect people's mental health. I'll admit it's affected mine, and I'm 53 years old. I mean, but for young people coming up, especially for these kids, and especially in middle school and high school, this is very difficult.
Today is another example, at the highest level in seat and position and power in the world, watching the new president of the United States articulate complete, utter nonsense and doing complete harm to the most vulnerable communities in his own society within the boundaries of the United States, which will have generational harm long term.
But the US president seems to be least bothered by the criticism that's coming his way. Instead, he wants to take it a step further. Donald Trump is also pushing the International Olympic Committee, or the IOC, to implement this rule on all international tournaments, and it will be interesting to see how the IOC will react to this. Last year, the same governing body defended Algerian boxer Iman Khalif and Taiwanese boxer Lin Yuting's participation at the Paris Olympics, despite many, including Elon Musk, criticizing the gender confusion of these two boxers.
I have explained before the issues that we have. It is not as easy as some may, in this cultural war, may now want to portray it, that the XX or the XY is the clear distinction between the men and women. This is scientifically not true anymore, and therefore these two are women, and they have the right to participate in the women's competition. And this has nothing to do with inclusion in any way.
The next edition of the Olympics will be organized in Los Angeles under Trump's regime. Will the IOC feel the same about these two boxers, although boxing hasn't been included at the LA Olympics yet due to governance issue, because the sports doesn't have a governing body yet? But if the event is organized, will the IOC still support the participation of these two, including other athletes whose gender is debatable? Even if they do, the Trump government wouldn't allow it to, because Trump has directed Homeland Security to deny visa applications if the gender of an athlete is debatable. The LA Olympics would be a battleground between the IOC's beliefs and Trump's strict policies. Athletes like Iman Khalif and Li Yuting may have gotten away at the Paris Games, but will the LA Olympics favor them? Looks highly unlikely under the Trump regime, because Trump has already ended the war surrounding women's sports. Anything new would turn into a new battle, a battlefield currently favoring the US president.
And transgender insanity the hell out of our schools.
We're calling the show Vantage. We hope you like what we put together for you. Touted as the minimum defense from that video. India's neighbors were the first to send the special edition of Vantage live from the White House throughout the state. Hindu Mandir in we're on our way to Tel Aviv. Measure, but it's also the perfect way to drive.
I don't think that
Prime Minister of Bhutan, Sherin Tagwe. Welcome to
60% of the world's
office. Prime Minister Modi did the iron.
we were actually
How are you doing? How do you like? It's been 1 year since that meeting. Iron bars separate you from the outside. Out the vote efforts. Trump had, it says, and at $4.3 trillion. 300 billion by 2030. That's what we need to tackle climate change.